Imagine waking up one morning as a child in the mid-1800s, and the world has just gone entirely permanently silent.
Yeah, just completely gone.
Right. The wind howling across the prairie, your parents' voices, the crackle of the fire, all of it, just gone.
It's a terrifying thought.
It really is. Now, imagine trying to become a physician in a society that, equates that physical silence with a lack of fundamental intelligence.
Right, they just assumed you were slow.
Exactly. Well, welcome back to DFC Books. It is a real privilege to have you sitting down with us again.
Always great to be here.
Before we take another step, I actually want you to drop a comment right now with any book requests you'd like to hear explored in future deep dives.
Yeah, please do.
We scour those comments for our next great read. And your suggestions constantly push us into, incredible new literary territories.
They really do. The recommendations have been amazing lately.
For sure. And today, we are exploring a massive, sprawling landscape. We are immersing ourselves in an incredibly rich historical novel called Shaman by Noah Gordon.
It is such a dense book.
Oh, unbelievably dense. We're talking about an era of really crude medicine, the chaotic echoes of the American Civil War, deeply buried family secrets, and the tragic clashing of cultures on the American frontier.
And that frontier setting is crucial, Gordon uses that unforgiving external landscape to reflect the tumultuous internal landscapes of his characters.
That's a great way to put it. So what's our exact mission for this deep dive?
Well, our mission today is to really dissect the lives of this profoundly complex cast of characters. We are going to explore how deep-seated trauma, physical and emotional silence, and the relentless pursuit of medical knowledge forge their identities.
So we aren't just going to recount the plot for you.
No, definitely not. We are going to trace our protagonist's journey through specific pivotal chapters.
Right.
We'll unpack the historical, medical, and psychological why behind every major event. We want to lift the hood and understand the engine driving these people through, honestly, a brutal period of American history.
I love that. But before we jump into those specific chapters, we need to set the board right. We need to understand the psychological makeup of this family.
Yeah, the dynamics are incredibly layered.
They really are.
Uh-oh.
Let's start with our protagonist, Shaman. His given name is actually Robert Jefferson Cole.
Right, named after his father.
Exactly. He is deafened by a childhood illness, which forces him to rely entirely on lip reading. But the fascinating part is that he developed this almost supernatural sensitivity to touch.
He calls it the gift.
Yeah, the gift. He is deeply empathetic, and his entire life's mission is driven by this burning need to prove himself as a legitimate physician.
Right, in a world that assumes a deaf person is practically an imbecile.
Exactly. It's a massive uphill battle, and his drive is inextricably linked to his father, Rob J. Cole.
Rob J. is just a towering figure in this book.
He really is. How would you describe him?
Well, he is a brilliant, highly respected frontier doctor, but he is deeply, almost tragically flawed.
For sure.
He has an immense capacity for compassion, yet he hides this extensive, labyrinthine, secret inner life. Like he harbors a lingering past love for a Native American woman.
Which is a huge plot point later.
Huge. And he carries the immense psychological burden of trying to be a savior to a frontier community, all while wrestling with his own very human frailties.
Yeah. For Shaman, Rob J. is this monumental shadow that he's constantly trying to step out of, or maybe desperately trying to measure up to.
A bit of both, I think.
Yeah. Now, I always found Shaman's mother, Sarah Cole, to be the most difficult character to crack.
She is tough. Very tough.
She presents as this stern, rigidly pious, uncompromising Baptist woman. At first glance, she just seems cold.
Right, unfeeling almost.
Exactly. But as you dig deeper into the book, you realize that religious fervor isn't just simple piety. It is a fortress.
It's a highly constructed trauma response.
Yes. It masks a history of profound trauma and hidden sins that she felt forced to commit just to survive on a completely lawless frontier.
Her rigidity is literally the only thing keeping her from shattering.
That is a crucial distinction to make.
Definitely. Trauma on the frontier often manifested as extreme control over one's immediate environment. And for Sarah, that meant strict religious and moral policing of her family.
It makes perfect sense when you view it that way. And acting as a total foil to Shaman's quiet dedication is his older brother, Alex.
Whom Shaman affectionately calls Bigger.
Right, Bigger. Alex is the classic prodigal son. He is rebellious, wild and deeply unsettled.
He eventually runs off to war, throwing himself into the meat grinder of the Civil War.
Yeah, just to search for his own identity away from the suffocating expectations of his father's legacy.
Exactly. Now, we also have to talk about the Native American characters who are foundational to the story, particularly the Sauk women, Makwaikwa and Moon.
Makwaikwa is so central to Shaman's identity.
She really is. She is the medicine woman who originally gave Shaman his nickname when he was just a toddler because he was fascinated by her herbs and roots.
And her tragic murder is basically the foundational trauma of the text. It's the ghost that haunts the entire narrative.
And Moon, on the other hand, represents the agonizing systemic displacement of the native people.
It's heartbreaking to read.
It is. She is a living manifestation of a culture being systematically eradicated by the very civilization the Cole family represents.
Yeah, that tension is always there. Tied intimately to the tragedy of Makwaikwa is Alden, the Cole family's farmhand.
Right, Alden. He's a deeply flawed, functionally alcoholic man, but he's essentially part of the family fabric.
He taught the Cole boys how to hunt, how to fight, how to survive.
Yet he holds this incredibly dark, corrosive secret regarding Makwaikwa's murder.
It's a secret that we see slowly rotting him from the inside out over the course of decades.
It's tragic. Finally, we have Rachel Geiger.
I love Rachel.
She's great. She's a Jewish widow who becomes Shaman's absolute anchor in a chaotic world. She teaches him the mechanics of speech, how to read lips with precision. Eventually, she becomes his wife.
Their union is just this beautiful merging of different immigrant and cultural experiences in a newly forming America.
It really is.
So with the board set, I want to take you straight into Chapter 1, which is titled Jiggity Jig.
The train ride.
Yes. The most important event here is Shaman's sensory-rich train journey home to Illinois. He's a young man. He's just received the devastating word that his father has died of typhoid.
And he's riding a locomotive called the Spirit of Des Moines back to his hometown.
Right. And the sensory details Gordon writes into this 1864 train ride are just overwhelming. Shaman cannot hear the train, but he feels the signals.
Vibrations.
Yeah. There is this delicate trembling in the wooden station platform that slowly builds into a violent, rhythmic shaking in his boots.
And the smells, too.
Oh, man, he smells the hot oiled metal, the sharp coal smoke, the stale stockings, the unwashed, sweaty flesh of all the soldiers and farmers crammed into the rail car.
Gordon is forcing the reader to experience the world exactly as Shaman does.
Right, because his deafness isolates him geographically and socially.
But it forces his other senses to become hyper-observant to compensate. Think about the physical reality of an 1860s train car.
It sounds miserable.
Oh, it was. There is no suspension to speak of. The noise would be deafening to a hearing person. The air is thick with particulate matter.
And Shaman navigates this highly chaotic environment entirely through sight, vibration, and smell.
Yeah.
It's like watching someone navigate a foreign country where they know the language visually but can't hear a single syllable.
That's a perfect analogy.
When the conductor taps his shoulder and loudly, ignorantly assumes he's deaf and therefore slow-witted, Shaman handles it with this practiced, almost weary ease.
He doesn't fight it, he just adapts.
Right. But the real turning point in this chapter isn't the train itself. It's his interaction with a Quaker homesteader, Mrs. Sperber.
Her skinny little boy, Lester, starts vomiting violently right there in the carriage.
And Shaman, who is swimming in profound, fresh grief over his father's death, immediately snaps into action.
His reaction is purely instinctual. He checks the boy's temperature using the back of his hand, he visually inspects his glands, and then he immediately investigates the environment, specifically the food.
And what does he find?
He discovers the mother has been feeding her children green, spoiled homemade sausage. Let's look at the medical reality of this for a second. In the 1860s, foodborne illness wasn't just a stomachache. It was a leading cause of childhood mortality.
Because they couldn't just rehydrate easily.
Right. Bacterial gastroenteritis could dehydrate a child to death in a matter of days. What's compelling here is that Shaman's medical instinct completely overrides his personal mourning.
This establishes his core identity right out of the gate. He's a healer first.
Exactly. He even trades his own good, fresh food for her spoiled meat.
Knowing that for a destitute homesteader, spoiled food is often the only food they have.
Yeah.
He has to physically remove the danger so she won't be tempted to feed it to the boy again.
It's a quiet, profound act of charity.
It really is. But, you mentioned typhoid earlier, the disease that killed his father.
Huh?
I feel like we use these historical disease names without really understanding them. What actually killed Rob J. Cole?
Typhoid fever is a brutal way to die. It's caused by the bacterium Salmonella enterica serotype typhi. In the 19th century, before water sanitation and antibiotics, it was just rampant. It spreads through the fecal-oral route, usually contaminated water or food.
Yikes.
Yeah. The bacteria invade the intestines, then move into the bloodstream. It causes a sustained, incredibly high fever, profuse sweating, and severe gastrointestinal trauma.
And without modern medicine.
If left untreated, which it essentially was in the 1860s, it leads to intestinal perforation. The bowel actually ruptures, leading to peritonitis, sepsis, and death.
Wow. So for Shaman to lose his father, a man who seemed like an invincible medical titan, to something microscopic in the water, it just shatters his worldview.
Completely shatters it.
And that shattering leads us perfectly into Chapter 2, the inheritance.
Right, because he finally arrives home.
Yes. And the most important event here isn't just that he inherits his father's medical practice, the physical building, and the instruments. He inherits his father's lifetime of secret handwritten journals.
This is a huge moment.
Yeah. I want you, the listener, to stop and imagine this for a second. Imagine finding out your parents had an entirely separate life, a vast inner world of desires, mistakes, and secrets that you knew absolutely nothing about.
It would be mind-blowing.
How would that completely reshape your own identity?
It's a staggering psychological shift for him. The emotional weight of these physical books is immense. Shaman cracks them open expecting dry medical notes on pharmacology or surgical techniques.
And instead?
Instead, alongside the medical data, he finds deeply intimate, highly controversial personal sketches. He finds a full-length clinical nude drawing of a woman, and with a shock of recognition, realizes it's his own mother, pregnant with him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And he reads detailed accounts of a sexual affair his father had as a young man in a Boston boarding house.
Reading that must have felt like a massive betrayal at first. You view your parents as these monolithic figures of authority, not as flawed humans with illicit affairs and hidden passions.
Betrayal, yes, but eventually it leads to profound connection. This isn't just an inheritance of property, it's an inheritance of unvarnished, raw truth.
Right.
For Shaman, reading these journals is the only way he can bridge the silent gap between himself and his deceased father. Through the written word, Shaman is finally able to hear his father's true voice.
That's beautiful. He begins to understand Rob J. not as an infallible medical god, but as a complicated, passionate, deeply flawed man who struggled with his own desires just like anyone else.
Exactly.
That idea of finding connection through silence brings us to Chapter 23, Transformations.
Oh, this chapter is intense.
It is. This chapter is essentially Shaman's origin story. The most important event is a harrowing flashback revealing exactly how he got the name Shaman, the terrifying illness that stole his hearing, and the desperate measures his parents took to force him to speak.
Let's start with the illness.
Okay, so he's a vibrant hearing child, and then suddenly he's plunged into absolute silence.
The book describes a terrifying fever. Historically, the most common culprits for sudden, profound childhood deafness in the 19th century were scarlet fever or bacterial meningitis.
And what does meningitis actually do?
Meningitis is an inflammation of the protective membranes covering the brain and spinal cord. The infection, or just the sheer heat of the fever itself, can cause irreversible damage to the cochlear or the auditory nerve.
So it's completely fried.
Yes. One day the child is hearing the birds, and the next day the auditory nerve is physically destroyed. The silence is permanent.
The parent's reaction, particularly his father, Rob J., is visceral and terrifying.
It really is hard to read.
Shaman, as a newly deaf child, naturally starts using his hands to communicate. He starts making up his own signs to express his needs.
Which makes perfect sense.
Right. And his father, in an absolute panic, takes soft rag strips and physically lashes Shaman's wrists together. He ties his hands to his belt to prevent him from using sign language, forcing him to vocalize.
It's brutal.
I have to admit, reading that made me furious. It's like throwing a kid in the deep end of the pool with weights tied to their ankles. It feels incredibly cruel.
It is cruel, but we have to analyze why a brilliant doctor would do this. We must contextualize this within 19th century attitudes toward deafness.
Okay, what were those attitudes?
At that time, society largely viewed deaf individuals as mentally incompetent. They were often institutionalized in horrific conditions, stripped of legal rights, and treated quite literally like animals.
Wow.
There was a massive debate in the medical community between oralism, forcing deaf people to speak and lip read and manualism using sign language.
And Rob J. fell into the oralism camp.
Exactly. Rob J. is paralyzed by the terror that if his son relies on signs, society will discard him. The cruelty of tying his hands is born of a desperate, panicked love. He is terrified Shaman won't survive the brutal reality of the 19th century if he doesn't speak.
It's the ultimate tough love taken to a traumatic extreme.
It really is.
And this intimate family trauma is immediately juxtaposed with extreme external danger. In the same chapter, young Shaman and his father are kidnapped by outlaws.
Such a tense scene.
They were dragged to a remote shack to treat a wounded man, and the kidnapper has a loaded gun trained right on young Shaman's head. It is a nightmare scenario.
Yeah, it becomes a masterclass in medical authority. Under literally life-threatening pressure, Rob J. maintains his absolute medical ethics.
Right, he refuses to back down.
He refuses to operate while the gun is drawn. He barks orders at the kidnappers. He demands adequate light. He demands boiling water for sterilization. He essentially takes control of a lethal situation through the sheer force of his professional authority.
And young Shaman, watching this unfold in total silence, absorbs every single visual detail. He learns that a doctor's authority supersedes even the threat of violence.
Which is a lesson that defines his entire career.
Exactly. And that visual absorption leads directly to the awakening of what he calls the gift in Chapter 34, The Return.
This is a pivotal moment for him.
It really is. The most important event here is when Shaman wanders out into the morning fog and discovers moon breaking into their spring house. The visual contrast Gordon paints here is heartbreaking.
Oh, it's devastating.
Moon has escaped a horrific reservation in Kansas. She's starving, broken, wearing a torn blue dress and a pair of heavy white man's work boots.
We noted the historical reality of Native American displacement earlier, but here we see the physical toll up close.
Right.
The Sauk people were systematically pushed out of Illinois, forced across the Mississippi, and eventually relocated to harsh, barren reservations in Kansas. The mortality rates from starvation, exposure, and disease were just astronomical.
So Moon's physical deterioration is a direct result of these genocidal policies.
Yes, exactly.
When Shaman finds her, he reaches out to comfort her. And this is where I need you to explain something to me because it almost feels like magic in the middle of a grounded historical novel.
Okay, let's hear it.
When he holds Moon's hand, he experiences this intense transfer of energy. He can literally feel the feeling life force within her. Is this a supernatural element, or is there an actual medical basis for this gift?
It reads as mystical, but it has a fascinating basis in compensatory neuroplasticity and deep clinical observation.
Compensatory neuroplasticity.
Yeah. When a person loses one sense, like hearing, the brain can rewire itself to dedicate more processing power to other senses, particularly touch and vision.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. So Shaman's gift is essentially an extreme heightening of tactile and visual sensitivity. He isn't reading a magical aura. He is feeling minute fluctuations in skin temperature, the subtle rhythm and strength of her pulse, the micro tremors in her muscles, and observing the exact pallor of her skin.
So to a layman, it looks like magic.
Exactly. But to a hyper-attuned doctor, it is profound, granular diagnostic data. His physical lack of hearing is compensated by this extraordinary ability to physically listen to the body's distress signals.
He is reading her body the way we would read a book.
That's a great way to look at it.
And speaking of reading the body, let's look at how he actually learns the mechanics of the human machine in Chapter 35, The Secret Room.
Oh, this chapter.
Yeah, the most important event here is deeply unsettling. Rob J. secretly excavates a hidden dirt room under their barn to perform illegal autopsies.
Yes, he does.
He actually brings young Shaman down into this bunker to study the corpse of a Chinese immigrant. I have to push back hard on this.
I know, it's rough.
From an ethical standpoint, dragging your young child into a hidden dirt bunker to slice open a stolen corpse is macabre. It borders on psychotic.
Through a modern lens, it absolutely sounds like a gothic horror novel, but we must evaluate this through the lens of 19th century medical ethics and necessity.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Anatomy was the great taboo of the era. The medical community knew they couldn't cure diseases if they didn't understand the internal mechanics of the body. But society, driven by intense religious objection, made dissection highly illegal.
So they couldn't practice on actual bodies.
You couldn't easily get cadavers. This was the era of the resurrection men grave robbers who supplied medical school.
Right, so Rob J. is basically running a rogue medical school for one in his backyard.
Precisely. And while it seems disturbing without understanding anatomy, a doctor of that era was essentially just guessing in the dark. Rob J. bringing Shaman into the secret shed is an act of supreme trust.
He's risking a lot.
He is risking prison to give his son the greatest medical advantage possible. And notice how he frames the experience for the boy. He doesn't treat the body like a piece of meat.
He says something really poetic, right?
He does. He teaches Shaman that the spirit leaves the body like an emptied house.
That phrase, like an emptied house, is so beautiful. It completely shifts the tone from a gruesome, grave-robbing scene to something deeply sacred.
It instills a profound respect for the dead. He hands Shaman the physical, failed heart of this Chinese man, allowing him to feel the valves, the muscle density. This secret room is the crucible, where Shaman truly becomes a physician. He learns the literal mechanics of the human machine in the damp silence of the earth.
All of that secret, intense education culminates in Chapter 60, A Child with the Croup.
This is where he proves himself.
The most important event is Shaman successfully treating a terrifying measles and croup outbreak in the town of Holden's Crossing, specifically treating Rachel Geiger's critically ill son, Joshua.
The stakes are incredibly high here.
And it's through this crucible that he definitively decides to stay and take over his father's practice, rather than fleeing to a city hospital.
To understand the stakes of this chapter, you have to understand the sheer terror of croup in the 19th century.
What exactly is it?
Croup is generally caused by the parainfluenza virus, which leads to swelling around the vocal cords, windpipe, and bronchial tubes. In an adult, the airway is wide enough to handle the swelling. In a young child, the airway is so narrow that the swelling literally chokes them.
That is terrifying.
They develop a harsh barking cough and stridor, which is a high-pitched whistling sound when they try to breathe in. Today, we give a child a steroid like dexamethasone, and the swelling drops rapidly.
But back then,
In the 1860s, a doctor could only rely on steam tents to loosen the mucus, or, in desperate cases, perform a crude tracheotomy.
you mean slicing a hole directly into the child's neck to let air in?
Exactly. And Shaman is facing this entirely alone.
Right. He isn't relying on his father's advice. His father is gone. He's relying on his own training from that dirt bunker, his own gift, and his sheer physical stamina.
He stays awake for days, managing the steam tents, monitoring the children's failing pulses.
When he saves Joshua, he earns his place in the community. He is no longer just Doc Cole's deaf boy. He is Dr. Robert J. Cole in his own right. The town accepts him because he stood between their children and suffocation, and he won.
It is the ultimate transition of power. He officially writes letters resigning from his prestigious hospital post in Cincinnati. He chooses the grueling reality of the frontier because he knows this is where his skills are needed most.
I just love that arc. Hey, if you, the listener, are finding this exploration of 19th century medical history and these hidden family dynamics as gripping as we are, take a second right now to subscribe to the deep dive.
Yes, please do.
Subscribing ensures you never miss our journeys into the psychological and historical depths of these amazing books. Your support truly keeps this show running.
We really appreciate it.
So, returning to Shaman's journey, we hit what I consider the absolute breaking point of the novel. Chapter 61, A Frank Discussion.
Oh man, this chapter.
The sheer density of explosive events in this single chapter left my head spinning. Let me just list them. Shaman attends a silent Quaker meeting. He visits a horrific Chicago insane asylum. He hears a devastating confession from his mother. He confronts a powerful politician. And he discovers his brother is rotting in a military POW camp.
It is a massive narrative unraveling. Gordon uses this chapter to pull every single plot thread tight until they snap.
Let's start with the Quaker meeting because the imagery there is brilliant. Shaman attends this meeting where everyone sits in total silence, waiting for the spirit to move them.
The absolute silence of the room perfectly matches Shaman's permanent physical silence.
Exactly. It's the one place in the hearing world where he truly fits in without trying. He sends his prayers into a shared communal quiet. It's beautiful.
It's a moment of profound spiritual rest, basically a deep breath before the narrative plunges him into absolute chaos.
And let's unpack that first descent into chaos, the asylum visit. He goes to the Dearborn Asylum in Chicago looking for a man named Elwood Goodnow.
He's hoping to find answers about the murder of the Native American woman Makwaikwa.
But instead, he finds Goodnow rendered completely mute and mindless by syphilitic paresis.
Right.
What exactly is syphilitic paresis? The book describes Goodnow as essentially a hollow shell of a human being.
Syphilitic paresis, or neurosyphilis, is the terrifying late stage of a syphilis infection. The bacterium, Treponema pallidum, doesn't just stay in the body. Over years or decades, it invades the central nervous system.
That sounds awful.
It is. It literally eats away at the cerebral cortex, particularly the frontal lobes, which control personality, language, and executive function. Goodnow hasn't just lost his speech. His brain tissue has been destroyed.
And the conditions of the asylum itself.
The historical reality of 19th century mental health care, what Shaman sees in that asylum, is chilling. Patients chained to walls, urine-soaked floors, zero therapeutic intervention.
Goodnell's condition is a grotesque manifestation of hidden sins. His secret life has literally consumed his mind.
Exactly.
And speaking of hidden sins altering a life, that brings us to his mother Sarah's confession. This changes the entire context of the family.
This is a huge revelation.
She finally tells Shaman that his older brother Alex is not Rob J. Cole's biological son. She reveals that Alex was fathered by either the outlaw Will Mosby or the politician Nick Holden. Suddenly, her entire character clicks into place.
It all makes sense now.
You realize her religious fanaticism, her rigid coldness, it wasn't just strict Baptist dogma, it was born of deep guilt, fear, and the profound trauma of being an unprotected widow on the prairie, preyed upon by powerful men before she met Rob J.
Precisely. We discussed earlier how trauma manifests as a need for control. Sarah built a fortress of piety to ensure she would never be vulnerable again and to hide the illegitimacy of her firstborn son.
And this revelation drags Shaman right into the political undercurrents of the era. The text delves into the macro politics of the Civil War discussions about President Lincoln, the Wade Davis Reconstruction Bill, and whether the South should be punished severely or treated with leniency.
Right. Now, Gordon brings this up just as historical context. We're not taking a stance here, but it shows how these macro events shaped their micro lives.
The Wade Davis Bill was the harsher approach to Reconstruction, right? Requiring a majority of a state's white male citizens to take an ironclad oath of loyalty, unlike Lincoln's more lenient 10% plan.
Yes, that's correct. And Gordon includes these historical details purely as context to show how the massive machinery of a nation at war directly impacts the characters.
Right, because Shaman realizes he can leverage the political power of Nick Holden, who is currently riding these political waves and who might be his brother's biological father, to get access to the military prison camp where Alex is being held.
Which leads to one of the most brutal scenes in the book. The description of that POW camp is a nightmare.
It's freezing, rat-infested, and the prisoners are literally dying of exposure and starvation.
Civil War prison camps, like Andersonville in the South or Camp Douglas in the North, were essentially death camps caused by logistical failure, overcrowding, and rampant disease.
Shaman wades through this hellscape, goes into a tent, and finds a pile of rags. Underneath it is his brother, Alex, so emaciated, so broken by scurvy and dysentery that Shaman barely recognizes him.
The mechanism of starvation Shaman observes in his brother is horrific. The body consuming its own muscle tissue to keep the brain and heart functioning.
And Shaman's navigation of the military bureaucracy, crossing state lines, and wading into this living hell showcases his relentless, unstoppable dedication to his family.
And he saves him, but it comes at a massive cost.
Yeah. Let's move to Chapter 70, A Trip to Nauvoo. The most important event revolves around the concept of closure, both physical and psychological. Alex is home, recovering, but only because Shaman had to perform a severe leg amputation to stop a gangrene infection.
We must consider what an amputation entailed in 1864.
I can't even imagine.
While ether and chloroform were being used to render patients unconscious, there was no concept of germ theory or antisepsis. Surgeons didn't wash their hands.
So the risk of infection was massive.
Astronomical. Shaman would have had to apply a tourniquet, use a literal bone saw to cut through the femur, and tie off the arteries with silk thread. They actually thought post-operative infection was a good thing. They called it laudable pus, before realizing pus was a sign of deadly infection.
That is just wild. Shaman physically whittling away his brother's infected leg bone is a grueling test of his medical skill.
It really is.
But the emotional whiplash of this chapter is insane. Shaman has just exhausted himself saving his brother's life, only to be called to the bedside of Alden, the alcoholic farmhand who practically raised him.
And Alden is dying.
He makes a deathbed confession that shatters Shaman all over again. Alden confesses that he helped cover up the murder of Makwoikwa.
Alden reveals the horrifying truth. A man named Korf killed the Native American medicine woman, and Alden, paralyzed by cowardice and fear of the law, helped hide the murder weapon.
And he tells Shaman exactly where it is.
Yes, Shaman goes to the ruined cabin, physically rips up the floorboards, and finds the pig sticker, a brutal, three-edged blade.
This physical object is the manifestation of all his childhood trauma, the very instrument that violently severed his connection to his surrogate mother.
It's incredibly heavy.
What he does with that blade is incredibly cinematic. He takes this horrific, rusted piece of metal down to the deepest, fastest part of the river. He draws his arm back, and he hurls it into the water.
It's such a powerful moment.
Gordon writes that it wasn't like Excalibur, no magical hand rises from the water to catch it. It just sinks into the mud. But Gordon also writes that a weight lifted from Shaman like a bird.
A beautiful image.
It is a beautifully symbolic moment of absolute absolution. He is finally truly free of the ghosts that have haunted him since childhood. The river washes the trauma away.
The psychological release of that moment cannot be overstated. By disposing of the weapon, he is disposing of his need for vengeance.
And that freedom clears the psychological space necessary for the events of Chapter 72, Breaking Ground.
Which is all about new beginnings.
Right. The most important event here is the foundation of his new life. Shaman and Rachel Geiger are married by Judge Hume, and they depart on horseback for a rugged honeymoon on the open prairie.
They are riding out to visit the returning Native Americans.
It's such a unique, defiant wedding trip. They don't go to a fancy hotel in Chicago. They pack supplies onto a horse named Ulysses and ride out into the dirt and the tall grass.
Because their union represents a profound religious and cultural merging that rejects the strictures of their pasts.
Exactly. Rachel is deeply tied to her Jewish heritage. Shaman comes from a rigid Baptist mother and a secular, science-driven father.
So they deliberately choose to be married in a civil ceremony by a judge, entirely outside the authority of the church or the synagogue.
And their decision to spend their wedding night camping on the unbroken prairie, consummating their marriage by a brook under the stars, is highly symbolic.
The unbroken prairie represents a blank slate. They are making a clean break from the rigid societal expectations of their parents.
They're forging a new, distinctly American path, blending their diverse immigrant identities in the raw landscape of the frontier.
It's a beautiful image of a new beginning.
And that journey leads them right into Chapter 73, Tama. They arrive at the Indian settlement, and the most important event is that Shaman finds the Sauk and Meskwaki people who actually managed to pull off the impossible. They bought back their own land in Iowa from the government.
Which is an incredible historical detail.
And while Shaman is there, a smallpox outbreak threatens the tribe, and Shaman immediately steps up to inoculate them.
Think about the symmetry of this narrative loop closing.
It's perfect.
Shaman, who was once a tiny, deaf little boy named by a Native American medicine woman simply because he liked playing with her herbs, is now returning to her exact people.
But he's returning as a fully realized man of science, armed with medical knowledge, to save her people from the deadliest disease the white man ever introduced to the continent.
It's so profound.
How did smallpox inoculation work in that era? Was it a shot with a needle?
Not like we picture today. In the 1860s, vaccination involved using a lancet to scratch the skin and introducing the cowpox virus into the wound.
Cowpox.
Yeah, which is related to smallpox but much milder. The body develops an immunity to cowpox that cross-protects against the deadly variola major virus of smallpox.
Ah, I see.
Given the historical devastation smallpox wreaked on Native American populations, Shaman bringing the vaccine to them is an act of profound restorative justice.
The cultural exchange in this chapter is just mesmerizing. Shaman sits by the fire during a tribal ceremony. He cannot hear a single note of the chanting, but he experiences the profound rhythmic drumming through the intense vibrations in the ground.
He feels the heat of the fire on his face.
Yeah.
He visually drinks in Rachel's wild, joyful expression in the firelight.
And then Little Dog, the son of the woman moon he tried to save years ago, bestows a formal title upon him. He calls him Kaza Wabiscu, the white shaman.
That moment is the absolute pinnacle of validation for his entire identity.
It really is.
He has spent his whole life feeling incomplete, battling the assumption that his deafness made him less of a man and less of a doctor. He constantly compared himself to his father.
And here, he is recognized as a true, powerful healer by the very people whose culture birthed his childhood nickname.
He isn't an imposter playing doctor. He is recognized by the earth and the people. He is the white shaman.
Which brings us to the perfect, quiet resolution in the final chapter, Chapter 74, the early riser.
The ending is so well done.
The most important event isn't a massive surgery or a political confrontation. It is simple, but incredibly powerful. Shaman fully assumes his role as a father.
He is walking along a long path, carrying Rachel's children, Joshua and Hattie, home.
Joshua has a scraped knee, and Shaman comforts him, kissing it better.
This simple, quiet domestic scene is the perfect counterweight to all the massive historical trauma, the gruesome autopsies, and the bloody tragedies we've discussed.
It brings it all back to a human scale.
This man who felt so isolated by his physical silence, who was so heavily burdened by the massive legacy of his father's secret journals, is now literally carrying his own family on his broad shoulders.
He is no longer just Rob J. Cole's deaf son. He is the patriarch of his own life, deeply rooted in the land he loves, secure in his profession, and secure in his family.
It is a stunning ending to a truly epic story. Noah Gordon weaves so many complex threads together: the history of medicine, the displacement of Native Americans, the horrors of the Civil War, and the intimate psychology of a deaf man, and resolves them perfectly.
He truly does. And as we wrap up our analysis of this incredible book, I believe you have one last takeaway for us.
I do. I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. I want you to think deeply about the concept of hearing versus listening in this book.
Oh, that's interesting.
Shaman is profoundly physically deaf. He lives his entire life in absolute silence. Yet if you look at the narrative as a whole, he is the only character who truly, deeply listens. He listens to his father's secret journals without judgment, accepting the flawed man. He listens to the unspoken, hidden pain of his mother's past. He listens to the microscopic physical ailments of his patients through his touch, his gift. And he listens to the silent vibrations of the Native American drums through the earth.
That is so true.
So ask yourself, what are we missing in our own lives because we are too busy listening to the noise rather than paying attention to the silence?
Wow. What are we missing because we're distracted by the noise? That is an incredibly powerful question to leave off on. Paying attention to the silence might just be the most important skill we can learn. Thank you so much for joining us on this extensive emotional journey through Shaman. Thank you for tuning in to DFC Books. Keep exploring the pages, keep reading deeply, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.